Hi there, and welcome back to First Dollar Academy. I'm your host, Jeremy Mohube. Our mission on this podcast is to give you, the listener, a template to start your own business. In episode 3, we are delivering on that mission and so much more. On today's episode, I'm joined by Luisa Castellanos, co founder of Science on Call. Luisa started her entrepreneurial journey way back in middle school, crafting stuffed animals and selling them online. Today, her company is disrupting IT support for the restaurant industry. Luisa's path is a testament to perseverance and innovation, and I'm sure everyone listening will gain some valuable nuggets from this episode. Luisa and I discuss how Science on Call navigated challenges early on, pivoted their business model during the global pandemic, and leveraged technology to serve a niche market. Join us as we explore Luisa's insights on fundraising, implementing AI, and the invaluable lessons learned in building a thriving tech-enabled startup. Luisa Castellanos, welcome to First Dollar Academy.
Thank you, Jeremy. I'm excited to be here and talk about founder life.
The founder life, the founder life. You know so much about that. You've been doing this for quite some time. I was looking back at your LinkedIn, and I realized that you've been founding since like I was in high school, basically. Like you've been
Since
you've
I
been
was
like
in middle school, so yes.
yeah. So you have a ton of experience. But for those folks that are just being introduced to you, could you talk a little bit about yourself? You know, where you're from and how you started. That first business in middle school.
Yeah, so I was raised by an artist and a computer programmer, so I got that left brain, right brain going, and really wanted to be a creative person since I was really young. And one day learned how to sew and started creating these little stuffed animal creature things and selling them and giving them to friends. And eventually it became a real business. So I walked into a store in Chicago called Roto Fuji, and my parents were with me, and they were like, "Yeah, you should just ask them if they'd want to sell these." And they really liked them and decided to start selling them in the store. So that was my first experience with entrepreneurship, and grew that business. At this point, I don't know like what my revenue was or anything like that. I was 11 years old, so I didn't know much about profitability or expenses and all that. But was selling them at places like Whole Foods, so I had to learn like invoicing and um, things like marketing, building a website, all that good stuff. And so over time, realized that I really liked being a business person.
Yeah.
And so I went to DePaul in Chicago for entrepreneurship and marketing, thinking, marketing's kind of creative, like maybe I'll go down that path. But then I also had a passion for art and wanted to potentially work in that field. And so my time at DePaul, I actually learned a lot about tech startups, surprisingly. In Chicago, it was around that time that 1871 opened, and my professors were really involved in that community. DePaul had a big presence in Chicago for entrepreneurship, and so that kind of led me down a path of the tech world, which at the time I didn't think I really fit in with because I was an artist and
Right.
I'm not you'll find I'm not a technical founder. I'm still a very creative person, and went to go work at an art museum for a few years as I was kind of figuring out what my next thing would be.
Gotcha. And so I think one of the things that's really unique, especially when folks start early in their kind of entrepreneurial journeys, is you don't have this concept of you have to, you know, h- allow someone else to give you the opportunity to make money, right? Like getting a job ultimately is, going, sitting down, interviewing, saying, "Hey, I have the skills and qualifications for the job. How much are you paying? Can I sign up?" You like
Yeah.
immediately, like from the time that you kind of started that first business when you were a girl, like knew, oh, I can make something of value to like provide. Talk a little bit about that experience and just how you've that shaped kind of your view of the world.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, and no one's really asked me that before. But I think as you're a kid in school, you want to go see movies, you want to buy toys, or have your own little spending money. And obviously, like I had babysat and dog walked and things like that. But this was a way for me to like create something and then make money from that. And so it was really exciting to be able to share that with other people. I loved the reaction that I would get from people, and I felt like it's almost like giving a part of yourself away a little bit as an artist. Like I think it's probably similar for startups that like you identify yourself as a founder, and I've learned ways to like kind of separate myself from that a little bit, but at the time, when you're an artist, it's like giving a piece of yourself away, and um it was exciting to get that kind of response. And I think as a kid too, any recognition that you get for something really encourages you to do more of it. Same with athletes or mathletes or whatever, whatever your thing is. When you get recognition, it makes you want to keep doing more of it.
Sure. So like I said, I did a little bit of research on you, and I found your Instagram, and I love your you really display your artistic side, and it's Lulu Luisa underscore pals, and
Yeah.
I really want to. I'm just so fascinated by your pocket pals. I can't
Yeah.
wait to ask you about this. So tell me, like, because obviously you started that, and you've been making things for a really long time. What was it like, you know, founding that LLC and like actually like starting a real full fledged business of your
Yeah.
creations? Like through that journey, how did you even know how to do that, and what did you do?
Yeah, I fortunately my parents, were really helpful in the kind of formation of a business and LLC. My grandma actually had a lot of experience with like taxes, and so she helped with like setting up sales tax accounts, and um, you know, I had other people in kind of the art world that helped me with like filling out applications to art fairs and that whole process. This was like 20 years ago, so I'm like, oh my gosh, like how do I even remember what it was like?
We dig deep at First Dollar Academy. We really dig.
Yeah, I think I like even created like a blog. Like websites weren't really a big deal back then, and so it was just I had a blog, and gosh, Instagram and all that, like, I think I even had a MySpace too. Like, I tried to get on all the platforms, and at school, everyone had their personal pages, but like all of mine were about my business. They were all Pocket Pals, like my MySpace, my everything. I had a Facebook page, all that stuff. And just, as other people were doing that for their personality or whatever, I was doing it for my business, and um, kind of gave me a good outlet for that.
For sure. But I think my favorite one I saw was like the little potato. Where did you where did you get like the inspiration from, or like how did you make, because they are
Yeah.
still also different. I mean, were you customizing them for people, or how are you doing it?
I did do some custom orders, but personally, like, and probably any other artist will tell you, like, custom orders are hard because you're like trying to fit it into somebody else's vision for art. And I just wanted to make stuff that came out of my own brain. And I couldn't even tell you, like, things would just like, I'd be playing outside and be like, oh my God, that's a good idea. Like, why did I just like cut that out in that shape? And like things would just find their own form as I started creating them. Yeah, I don't really think about it a lot, but it was just things that just came out of my brain.
For sure. No, that's awesome. So yeah, so obviously you went to DePaul, like you said, and then left there and kind of started your own path. It's really interesting the way that you have kind of you formed your first or you formed one of a business that's now like kind of pivoted to the startup that you're working on now. Talk a
Yeah,
little bit about your experience with science, where you guys were focused really on like retail, and then
yeah.
what like made you guys decide to pivot to focus more on restaurants?
Yeah, so Science Retail, we started that in 2014. My co-founder and I actually knew each other his wife's an artist, and so we ran in kind of the same art circles. And so I've known Andy, my co-founder, for I think over 15 years at this point. So he's known me since Pocket Pal days, and we actually ran into each other at a craft fair his wife was doing, and he was leaving Intelligentsia Coffee. He was the IT director and wanted to start his own thing. And we ran into each other, and he said, "Hey, I'm starting this business. We're going to work with all these brick and mortar businesses." And, at the time I was like, I'm not a tech savvy person, but I really like Intelligentsia, and I really like all of these cool coffee shops, record stores, shoe stores. I'm a foodie. I love shopping. Like, it was kind of a dream come true. And so we set out to start that business. But as a founder with an idea and no revenue, you think, oh, well, I got to make money somehow. And so I was leaving DePaul, and I really felt like DePaul set me up on a path of like, you got to get a full-time job, and you got to make a lot of money, and parents' expectations that you're going to make money after college too. So I took a full-time job at an art museum in my hometown, small art museum, Elmhurst Art Museum. And so decided to do that with science on the side so that I could still do some of those projects, but have some revenue, have some income coming in, which anyone who's worked in art museums knows it's not a lot of money. And so, but it was an experience that I wanted, and it gave me the opportunity to be back in my hometown and be close to my family and explore the art world to see if that was something I really wanted to do. So I ended up being at that museum for 3 years and learned everything about running a business. Like, I was doing memberships, I was doing donor relationships, I was doing guest check-in, retail. I installed a new point of sale system there. I was the person they called when the fire alarm or the security alarm went off. I would create badges for people, like everything. And so I did get a little bit burnt out and realized, this other thing I have going is kind of interesting. Why don't I focus on that full time? And Andy, we worked out a deal where he was like, we have some recurring revenue, like we can pay you this amount of money, just leave the museum, and we'll work on this full time. And within a month of that, we actually signed our first big customer, which is 16 on Center in Chicago. They own and manage Empty Bottle, Thalia Hall, Salt Shed, like all these really cool brands in Chicago. And so that was just like a dream come true. We were like, we've built something really cool here. And they were really like our first hospitality customer too. Like, we had a few retail customers, but for the most part, we were doing projects. And with 16 on Center, we set up a like recurring kind of retainer with them. And so they could call or text or email any problems that they had in any of their restaurants or their music venues. And that's kind of where the idea of Science on Call, our current company, came. We realized that there was no real on-demand support for hospitality businesses. And so that's kind of where we landed with Science on Call, the business we're running now.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'm really curious because you talk a little bit about that transition from the museum to now working full time on science. And as you said at the beginning of the call, you're not like a fairly technical person, but you have all the the business acumen and everything that you've learned since you were a young girl. What was it like getting on calls with customers that may have been technical or may have asked you technical questions, and like how did you find where you fit, especially in those early days?
Yeah, and it kind of feels like a really great coincidence that Andy and I met, and we have kind of complementary skill sets. So Andy covered a lot of the on-site, like cabling, networking, point of sale installations. And I had, made a blog. I grew up in this tech age where like everything's digital. And so I had experience, like setting up email accounts or creating web pages. And so I was more of the digital side, and just kind of learned by doing, to be honest. I people would ask me, can you look at this code on the Squarespace website. And I was like, you know what? I could just Google it. Like somebody's dealt with this problem before. And so a lot of it was just like kind of taking it off of their plate and me doing it instead, which is kind of the idea of Science on Call is that people in a restaurant, people in a music venue, they don't have time to go on a computer and troubleshoot something. We can take that off their plate. And so that became kind of our mission was just alleviating that pressure from them.
Sure. And so I guess you kind of start. There was a major shift though, right? When you went
Hmm.
from science retail to science on call, and like you said, you made the decision based on the attraction of your customers, like the types of customers you guys were getting, and then it
Yeah.
looks like you guys wanted to pivot and really focus in on that. Tell me about those early days. How did you started back in the pandemic, right? And so first off, like we were all, I remember during that time, we were trying to like save our favorite restaurants, and
Exactly.
it was kind of a crazy time. No one was really going out to eat. There was a big need and a big boost for delivery, and a lot of restaurants had to kind of figure out and scramble how to do that really quickly. Tell me about like those early days and how you guys were able to build like relationships, maintain them. Restaurants were closing down left and right. Like, how did you guys do that?
Yeah, so back in the end of 2019 is when we really decided to focus on restaurants. 2019. And we actually fired all of our non-restaurant customers. We had a few like office buildings. We kept like we had like one um spice merchant in Chicago that we kept. And so all of those customers we had, we just moved them to a subscription model. Go Get 'em Tiger Coffee in LA, still a customer today. Um, they were on the subscription model, 16 on center. I think those were the big ones. And we actually ran into some people who were in the restaurant tech scene in Chicago, startup community, and learned about a program called Food Foundry, which is run by Relishworks. They're the innovation hub for Gordon Food Service. And we had attended an event and ran into some folks who were actually building a platform for kitchen repairs. So, like your deep fryer, your walk in cooler. Um, and so we thought, well, that's kind of a similar model to what we're trying to do. Like, why can't we just make this into a startup? And we applied to that same program and we were accepted in January of 2020. And so that was kind of when we started to realize that this could be something scalable that could help many restaurants. And we learned everything about running a startup from unit economics, KPIs, fundraising, all that good stuff. Like it's really founder boot camp when you join an accelerator. And we were surrounded by other restaurant tech companies, a lot of whom had already started and built something and were trying to get it off the ground. So it was a really good opportunity to learn from other founders. And so, as we all know, 3 months later, the pandemic hits and all of our customers shut their doors. I remember my co founder and I went out for one last breakfast at one of our customers, and just like the feeling, the mood was just so like we just don't know what's going to happen. We left like a huge tip for the staff there because we're like we just don't know when they're going to go back to work, and we want to help them. Like it was just heartbreaking because these are places we all love. Like all of our customers were places we go to and we eat at, and just that feeling of like are these places still going to be around was just heartbreaking. And that was really the motivation to do anything we could to help them. If it was setting up online ordering or integrating them with their point of sale, finding the best delivery partners, putting up new messages on their website. We weren't charging at the time. We decided, like, if we don't have customers, like if they close, we don't have customers, we don't have revenue. So we might as well do work while we can. And fortunately, like we were still in the accelerator program, we were still building Science on Call. We wanted to kind of test that concept. And, it was really the perfect time to be able to do that. Like we actually had received a little bit of investment from Relish Works. And so that helped us bring on our CTO and our third co founder. and he helped us through that time as well. He was like the technical co-founder we needed, like at the right time, the right place, right time. Um, and so yeah, it really all kind of came together and helped us get to June of 2020, which is when we officially launched Science on Call.
Gotcha. And so you talked a little bit about obviously how you were able to kind of shift and pivot and things kind of fall into the right place. I'm
Hmm.
so curious. So, and this is up your alley. I guess this is your department, uh, growth and like your customer base, right? So, what were your how were you approaching restaurants to get them to sign up with you, especially during the difficult time that was COVID, and
Yeah.
what were you at that time offering them that they ultimately couldn't do on their own?
Yeah, so a lot of it was still our background in consulting and projects. And so we would find a customer, they would come to us as like a referral. Thankfully, like Gordon Food Service, Relish Works, they had a really great community of restaurant operators that they would invite to events and panels. And so some of our earliest customers actually came from that community. And, we're a Chicago based company. So word of mouth, people hearing about our ability to help them with a certain project was a good way for us to get in the door. And so a lot of those early customers, we said, "Hey, we'll set you up with online ordering. We'll get you." We set up a lot of like access points outside so people could get internet outside because those tablets, they don't work. They can't process credit cards unless you have internet. So we did a lot of jobs like that, a lot of installation work, and then afterwards we said, "Hey, we want to like be a partner. We want to continue to support you. It's only 149 a month and you can call us as much as you want." And looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, like 149 a month for each location. I mean, we had maybe a handful of customers in those early days. Most of them were single unit. We had a few that were like maybe 5 locations. But Chicago is a huge like hospitality uh, industry, and so a lot of these are single locations. They're really well known. They're Michelin star restaurants, like all these kind of big names. I won't name any of the names right now, but eventually a lot of them ended up not being a good fit for our later business. And so that transition, we can talk about that as well, like going from being consulting to being like a more automated platform. Our customer base kind of changed.
Yeah, I'm really curious to hear, and I know so many folks always ask the question like, how do you price? And you just touched a little bit on that.
Yeah.
Uh, what goes into that decision on how much the price is for your particular product, and then when do you realize like, okay, it's time to change the price, or
Yeah.
tier at least the price on based on the type of project you guys are working on?
Yeah. So we had some customers from our early days that were kind of paying this 149, 179 a month type of pricing. And then because they were a larger group, we gave them kind of discounts. So like one of our oldest customers are still on like 125 a month. Like, we locked them in on a 3-year contract to get that recurring revenue. And that actually really helped us fundraise. At the time we were like, we just need more customers. Investors want to see big brands, they want to see lots of customers, lots of growth. And so at the time it was like at all costs, like we just need that recurring revenue, even if it's like 99 a month and we just do one thing for them. So a lot of it was just kind of trial and error. We also had one customer that was paying significantly more per month, and it was because like they came to us for like bigger consulting projects, and so we knew like my time and Andy's time is valuable, and if they're gonna ask for a big project every month, like at least 2,000 a month, like something, whatever they'd be willing to pay. And so it was really just kind of trial and error at the beginning. And then once we started to approach larger restaurant groups, 10 or more locations, that pricing became a little bit more sensitive. And so we had to really sell them on everything we could do for them. So we had to be a little more specific, like, hey, we'll help you with your, when your internet goes out, we'll help you when your phones go down, when your printers aren't working. So we started to like list out all the things that we did. And obviously there's going to be scope creep and people still wanting help with bigger projects. And we kind of just let them use us for that because they were early customers. But that definitely becomes difficult over time as you're trying to grow and the co-founders are focused on other things. So I think that the big shift in like our business in general came probably in 2021 when we started to really hire other people on our team and realized like we can't have our customers asking about like, hey, my brother's laptop, I spilled water on it, like all these kind of weird things people would ask, and we're like, our team is not equipped to deal with this. Like, we need to really narrow down what we do and be more specific. But yeah, we've changed our pricing a couple times, but to be honest, like it's still probably lower than we would like it to be, but it helps acquire these kind of larger customers. We have changed our pricing. I would say for the most part, our pricing changes happened more with like the single unit and independents because we knew they were going to use us a lot more and the margins just didn't work out. So we were like, we love you, we want to keep you, this is the price if you want to still work with us. And a few people, ended up leaving us, for better or for worse because of the pricing.
Sure. I'm going to ask you a real quick question about um, the structure in which you guys have kind of narrowed your path and the specific types of projects that you want to do. But I wanted to ask really one quick question about the fundraising mechanism. So
Mhm.
you all are rolling, you're getting big customers, signing people up, kind of starting to generate recurring revenue. Um, what was that discussion? I don't know if Kenya was around then, or maybe he had just joined up. What was that discussion with Ken and Andy on uh, how we decided like this is the time to fundraise, and then based on the amount that you guys were making at the time, what the shares looked like and how you would like give that to VC or some capital group that like wanted to invest in you. Well, what
Yeah.
was the conversation like? I'm sure it was very interesting. And then, how did you guys decide to evaluate that business at that time?
Yeah, very good questions. So Andy and I had no experience with fundraising. Like him and I at the beginning of Science Retail, we had like a phantom equity agreement that was like, he owns a part and I own a part. That was it. And like we had just kind of a general lawyer write something up. Honestly, I don't even know what was in that, but at this point, Science LLC is dissolved. And what we actually ended up doing was, in order to raise money, you have to be a C Corp. So we learned that like day one of the accelerator. They're like, if you want this 75K, you have to be a C Corp. And so thankfully, we had some other founder friends who'd gone through that. And I think we still used our kind of generalist attorney to help with this part of it, but we basically absorbed Science LLC. Science Retail Inc. was our new company. We go by Science on Call, but our corporate name is Science Retail Inc. On official paperwork. And so we Science Retail Inc. bought Science LLC for like $1,000 or something. Like, so Andy and we still owned the same percentage of the company as we did with the earlier one, but it became more formal because we had shares. And I think what we had to do was like there was a price per share, and each of us had to put in like 10 cents per share or something. Like it was just so small, but just to prove that like we owned those pieces. And then we had a term sheet from Relish Works, which set the cap, the valuation cap for our that first round, which we would call it a round, I guess. And it was I think 2.5 million, something like that. And we had no idea what any of this meant. And we just were like, yeah, okay, they're gonna give us money, and wow, 2.5 million, that sounds like a lot of money, like
Right.
great. And we had actually met Ken and asked him to help us out during the accelerator. We told him, we're going to have some investment as part of this. And so hopefully by the end of this program, if you want to keep working with us, we can find a role for you. You know, I would say to any founder that's like starting out with a new co-founder, like test it out first, see how it goes, like maybe hire them as a contractor for a few months just to see like the relationship. And I think within like a month or two, we were like, this guy's so good. Like we need him. Like he completely flipped our business on its head. He was like, why are you guys doing things this way? Like, like there's so many better ways to do this. He set up like all these different systems. We were using like a spreadsheet for tickets, and he was like, we'll get a ticketing system, we're going to set up this phone number, it's going to link to this, and all this stuff. And so yeah, it was pretty soon that we were like, we want him to be our third co-founder. But obviously Andy and we had put 5 years into consulting, and neither of us were really making any money from that. We were like, we still need to own a larger share of this. And so we worked that out. I think it was probably when we went on to raise a little more money that we decided to set up a vesting schedule for Ken. And so that's a pretty common thing. You can work with your attorney to set that up. So usually it's a 4-year vest with a 1-year cliff. So they don't actually earn any of that until 1 year. And you can do that with other employees later on as well. It's just a really good way to keep people incentivized, and they're not going to just work for you for 3 months, take your equity, and then run. If they want the full vesting, they'll stick with you for a few years at least. So with the investors coming in and fundraising, when we were in the accelerator, there was a lot of other founders who were fundraising. We had the opportunity to meet with investors, with mentors. I will say it did feel a little bit like we saw it as like, we can't really grow this unless we raise money. Like, it's just me, Andy, and Ken. We need to bring on more people. We need to build something, and we need to acquire customers. And so we didn't actually raise our friends and family round until after that accelerator program. And I don't know, I think we had a deck. I don't know what we really sold them on, but thankfully Andy and I have some family members that were really excited about the idea. And I think my dad was probably the hardest sell. He was, he's like, well, what's my return gonna be? And I was like, I don't know how any of this works. Like, if you believe in me, it'll become something big, I promise. So we had family members that went in on that. We had a customer that actually came in on that round, and a friend of his, and it just kind of built from there. I think we ended up raising $300K in our friends and family.
Oh, wow.
We really rallied and found some people to come in on that. And I think there was actually an accelerator or a VC check in there early on. Long Jump is a VC in Chicago that is founder led, focuses on diverse founders. First check, like friends and family round, doing amazing things. And we met them, and they just felt like the perfect culture fit. Like, I met Kristen Sande from their team. She's a Latina founder, like crushing it in the world. And I was like, I want her on my team. Like, she just feels like my person. And the others on the team too. I was like, I didn't believe there was people like us out there. And I didn't know much about the terms, and we were like, whatever they are, it feels like a good fit. And so we took their first check as well. We were part of their first round of investments as well, so we were kind of learning alongside them. But yeah, I think for any investor we were bringing in, it had to feel like a good fit. And friends and family is difficult because you don't want to let anyone down.
Right.
That's like a whole another ball game. Like, depends what your relationships are with your family, and getting them to understand that like they could lose this money. Like, very easily. Like, this is the very early stages. It's the most risky time. But the upside is if this becomes a billion-dollar company, their $5,000, goes a long way. And at that early stage, $5,000 is a big deal. It's like we could set up a website, we can pay for a CRM, we can hire someone part-time for like a couple hours just to get some customers. So yeah, it was a big game changer. Once we raised some money, it was like we could hire people, we could do a lot.
How do you not run out of the money?
Thankfully, like I personally am the kind of person that like will not allow myself to run out of money ever. Like I am super grateful for the way my dad taught me about managing money. I paid for a lot of my college and like kind of learned from that and from business school, like how to create like, some kind of expense reports. We had a fresh bank account with money in it. I think during the first accelerator, we did a session on financial modeling.
Mhm.
Um, and so that helped me to visualize like at least the few expenses we had, like put them on a sheet with your starting balance and subtract each month what you're paying for. And we had enough in the bank where like Andy and I don't even know if we were paying ourselves much of anything, but we were like, we'll just kind of keep whatever's left over to pay ourselves at the beginning.
Sure. So you obviously you get this big boost from the fundraising. You're rolling. You've hired officially a co-founder, a couple of folks to help out to run the business. I'm so curious to hear about as you start to become like big boys and big girls, and like really attack how you're going to sell your product. You know, the restaurant industry is so funny because people don't realize how much technology actually is involved from the time like they book a reservation to the time they leave the restaurant, right? And
Yeah.
so you're working with all different types of technologies, all different types of people. Are you uh are you guys, in terms of your support, just essentially helping whatever POS or reservation system that restaurant has? Or are you also, kind of trying to lead your customers to, implement certain technologies so that you can just better serve them, I guess, more efficiently?
Yeah, that's a good question. So early days, we were pretty much like any system you have, we'll support it because our team are very curious problem solvers. So if they've solved a problem with one POS, they can probably solve it with another as long as they understand the mechanisms and how to log in and how to make a change in the setting. They understand networking and how internet service works. Like that's kind of the basics of everything. Like every restaurant has internet service and everything's connected to the network. Like at the end of the day, a lot of the problems we see are related to that. Or if it's digital, it's logging into the platform and making a change in the setting. Or if you really can't figure it out, you call the vendor and you troubleshoot over the phone with the technical person. So we worked with so many different platforms. And we definitely had customers who were like, well, we're not super happy with this platform. What's another one you recommend? And at the very beginning of science, we were like, we are not going to be persuaded by any point of sale to sell their system. We're selling science on call support for any platform. We're not like going to make referral fees or recurring commission or anything from any of these point of sale systems. They tried and a few of them like we were like, well, we're selling them anyways, like, sure, we'll put them in the pipeline and make a couple bucks from it. But for the most part, we were like, there's some systems that we really like working with. Now that we've had a lot of experience, we're like, okay, this system has very few problems compared to that system.
Right.
This system has very bad support. Don't use that. Like we wouldn't say that explicitly, but we definitely had our favorites. And so if they were considering something new, we would help them find that. Because that was, part of our original business was installing new point of sales. And it actually helped to look for customers that were willing to innovate We've even today, our best customers are innovative, tech savvy, forward thinking, usually like a kind of young, hip team that really wants to grow quickly, and you can't do that without good technology. And so the platform that we're building now is very based off of the integrations and the technical pieces of these kind of more tech forward point of sale systems. We probably have 70% of our customers using Toast, for example.
Right.
And so if we're going to build an automation, we're going to start with the integrations with Toast and Olo and DoorDash. Like, because so many of our customers are already using those, we're going to develop something that works with those platforms. And so when we do go out and look for new customers, typically we do ask them, what platforms are you using? If they're using the same 5 platforms as all of our other customers, great. Like, we'll sign you up today. There's going to be no extra work on our part. Our team already knows everything about all those platforms. Um, so that's been kind of like part of our go-to-market strategy.
For sure. That's awesome. And I'm so intrigued by that. I actually used to be a server. I've worked in many different restaurants, many different systems.
Yeah.
There are better systems than others, and I always wonder the process that goes into because really, especially if you have a bunch of different restaurants, once you get on one system, it's so hard to like get
Oh
out.
yeah.
There's just a lot
Oh
of work
yeah.
involved, and it's very, very costly. So thank you so much for answering that question because I was super curious. So
Yeah.
if it's so funny because when you work in IT support, typically if things are going well, nobody knows.
Yeah, right, right.
If you guys are nailing it, it doesn't seem like almost like you're doing anything. And so, tell me a little bit about how you contract your customers in terms of, the deals that you guys sign them up for, and then once that renewal kind of comes, that conversation about like, well, this is what we've been doing for you. How do you track like the value that you've been
Yeah.
providing?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So it definitely depends on what the like primary issues are with that customer, but you're right. If we notice something coming up in all the ticket reports like, hey, this password reset is happening every single day, 10 times a day, our team is taking care of that for you. Um, until we automate it, which is the path for a lot of these problems, um, we can show them, hey, remember when your team had to spend 30 minutes every single time this happened? Well, now our team is doing it in 3 minutes every time it happens. And your team doesn't even have to worry about it. And so it's usually problems like that like they know we're taking that off their plate because they were doing it before. And now they don't have to do it. So and a lot of times we're working directly with the head of IT or somebody in the IT department who used to be doing these problems. There are users. Our buyers are usually the CEO or the CFO, somebody higher up who's in charge of like deciding how to manage their IT stack, like who to hire and how to manage that. With these bigger customers especially. And so they're thinking of it big picture. They're thinking we have 50 restaurants and all of them have 3 problems a day. Like, that's 150 problems every day. One person cannot manage that. Like, it's impossible. They would be working 24/7. And so they know that they need another solution that can do that for them. In some cases, it's kind of an insurance policy for them. They know that if one outage happens across all their restaurants each day, they could be losing thousands of dollars. And have, not to mention angry customers, staff quitting, all that stuff. So it's very big picture for the buyers to think of, um, as like as any corporation would probably think about, like the top line, what's costing us the most? Oh, it's people. So if people are spending time doing it, how can we make their jobs easier and reduce the amount of time they're spending?
Fantastic. So I have just a couple more questions for you. This next one is a little bit more, I guess, pie in the sky or growth. Um, we know that it's been a very weird economic cycle in 2024. You know, technically the economy is doing well, but you know, generally like people aren't feeling that way. I think one of the things, and I live in Dallas, Texas, so one of the things that we've noticed, obviously just anecdotally, like a lot of the places that we like, you know, are here today and gone tomorrow, and then
Hmm.
maybe a new place pops up. In terms of growth, and I don't know if you guys have updated the photo on the website in a while, but I counted 11 people in terms of the staff, including yourself. Um, as the based on kind of how the market goes in the restaurant industry, how are you guys kind of looking at growth, and how does that like actually impact you being able to sign on customers?
That's a good question. So yeah, we do have to update the website a little bit, but for the most part, our support team has grown less than our amount of customers because of the automations we've put in place. This is a question that every investor asks us about is like, how many people are on your team? What are your margins? And because we were a tech enabled services business, we had humans doing a lot of the work up until, a couple years ago when we started to implement some macros, some slight automations here and there. Only until like this year when we actually had a head of product were we able to build actual automations as part of our platform. So the team we have is still very much working on the edge cases, working on very difficult problems, related to things we haven't seen before or things that still require a human. But as we grow our customer count, we are looking for customers that don't take as much human effort because we can automate the problems they're having. And like you said, restaurants are opening and closing and coming and going, but the restaurants that we're working with are usually growing brands where they have maybe 13 now, but they're on their way to 50, or they have 50 now and they're on their way to 300. And they have a plan for that. And so when we sign them on, we make sure we know what their plans are and make sure that we can support them long term. If that means like we have a ratio right now, I think we support like 60 restaurants per human. We want to get that to 100 restaurants per human. And with automation, like we track things like that to see when we're going to need to add another person. We want to make sure our team is not overwhelmed because they burn out and they leave. And so we are very cautious of that. We're a very people focused business. We want to make sure that the people we employ have a good experience and like what they're doing.
For sure. That's awesome. And I truly appreciate the time. I think this has been really great. You've given so much great information, and like your experience is really, really interesting. The last question I have for you, actually, scratch. I have two more questions. I lied.
Okay.
I, talk a little bit about like how you guys have implemented AI and how
Yeah.
that's kind of like helped specifically for your business. I mean, it's a great use case, and you're able probably to get so much more done, so much more quickly. Talk a little bit about that if you have any information about that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we are at the end of the day an AI and automations company, and we're using it internally, but we're also using it in a way that our customer experience will be much better. To them, they just text us and they just want a problem solved. They don't care how it's done. They're just like, get it off my plate, do it for me. And so, for the most part, everything automated is happening behind the scenes and it's involving problems we've seen before. So every time we see a new problem, we're documenting how it's done and how to, do it the next time. So we're building automations around the common problems. Obviously, there's going to be edge cases, but we also are using our own kind of specialized language model that uses all of our data from every ticket. We've solved over 250,000 tickets over the last 4 years. Like we've seen every problem. Our AI is using the conversations that have happened in the past. So when you're texting with our platform, you may not even know it's a human or a bot at this point. Like it could be troubleshooting based on previous conversations. We can also do it in any language as well. So exploring that with some potential new customers. You know, globally at this point we can go anywhere. because everything we do is remote. But yeah, I think a lot of the AI and automations piece, I'm not a technical person, but it is what we're building. We're using robotic process automations to do tasks, which is kind of taking it a step further from your typical like ChatGPT, where you ask it a question, it gives you an answer. Our customers are asking us a question, and we're answering it, but we're also doing the task for them.
Right. Awesome. Yeah, and I imagine like obviously when it comes to handling IT support tickets and having all that data, there's
Yeah,
common threads across multiple different systems, and you're able to kind of really write that into the LLM,
yeah,
like you said.
yeah.
So the last question, I'm going to ask you to look a little introspectively, okay,
Okay.
from your experience, from your early days of making arts and crafts and selling them to pocket pals to science. You've built up a lot of skills like along the way, and a lot of that has helped shape who you are today. What are some of the things you feel like if you were kind of just to start fresh, uh, what are the things that you need to like learn and just be good at to be a successful entrepreneur, a successful businesswoman?
Yeah, I think there's a couple really important things that you need to have as a founder. One of them is surround yourself with smart people. Like the more that other people know, the better your business is going to be, and trust those people to do good work. People want to have autonomy, they want to be recognized for what they're good at, and that is one of the most important things for our business even today. Is like, I don't know what tickets are coming in. Like, I there's no way I could have an eye on every single thing that's happening. And fortunately, we've gotten to the point where we have support with customer success, with accounting, with all these other areas of the business that I can kind of just let that happen. So letting go and being able to let other people do that work. The other thing is like prioritization. Like, your time is super valuable, and you need to focus on what's most important in this moment, and not, there's so many things you could be doing every day, but there's only really like one important thing you need to get done today. Like, what is that one thing? And get that done first. Everything else can wait.
Right.
Like, get it done first. And if you do that every single day, like, at the end of the month, you'll be like, wow, I accomplished 30 amazing things. Like, and so that's something that I've learned, I think even just in like the last year, has become more important to me, as like the COO of a seed stage company. And I know that that's going to change even more so with Series A, Series B. Our team is going to double, triple, and my job's going to change a lot.
For sure. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Louisa. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. This has been fantastic. Really
It
quickly,
has.
where can people find you and learn more about you?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably the one social media that I still use fairly regularly. um, and then, our website, scienceoncall.com. Um, I would say those are the places to find me.
Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for your time. Really appreciate you. I want to thank Luisa Castellanos for joining me on today's episode. She dropped so many invaluable insights, and I'm so happy that we had the chance to sit down and talk. If you want to hear more episodes like this, you can subscribe to anywhere you get your podcasts or go to www.jeremymohue.com and find how you can subscribe to the newsletter, which will bring the podcast directly into your inbox. Thank you again so much for joining us, and hopefully you'll come back soon. See you later.